Namaste. In our ongoing series of psychoanalysis and mythology, our topic of talk today is calendar of Hindu myths. Hindu mythology is the richest mythology in the world. Hindu society celebrates festivals revolving around myths all round the year. But does this calendar of celebration have a deeper meaning? To discuss the subject, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sir, Hindu society celebrates festival all round the year. And is there a coherent calendar existing there?
If we look at all the festivals celebrated by the Hindu society, we can group them in five broad categories. Festivals which are celebrated linked to the weather. In older times, when good weather would start, it would be a assurance of better survival prospects. So that would be one group of festivals which are linked to weather. Second would be related to the agriculture. So when the harvest would usually happen, there would be some festival. So if we look at the first part, the weather linked festival, you can look at Makar Sankranti. If we look at agriculture linked festival, you can look at Baisakhi. And then we have uh, events which bring prosperity, like when traders would go out of India to sell something and come back. Those would be the third categories of festival which are linked to prosperity in some way. Fourth would be festivals which are adopted just for the sake of pleasure and fun, either generated inside or adopted from other cultures. And lastly, festivals which are celebrated according to a spiritual calendar. Now, all these festivals are Hindu festivals, but the spiritual calendar of festivals is different from other festivals which are essentially utilitarian or fun oriented, celebratory, or more social occasions. Whereas the spiritual calendar refers to a calendar of festivals across the year which is in tune with the spiritual process somebody is following. Naturally, this calendar is not one, there are multiple spiritual calendars. Some spiritual groups follow the calendar from Makar Sankranti to Makar Sankranti, 15th January to 15th January. Some spiritual groups, they follow the calendar from Ganesh Chaturthi to next Ganesh Chaturthi, which would be around August to August or September to September. Some groups would follow Diwali to Diwali, which would be roughly October to October. Some groups would follow the Vikram Samvat calendar also as a spiritual calendar. But the calendar as a spiritual calendar does exist. There is a spiritual calendar of festivals, and it is not surprising that multiple festivals are celebrated on the same day in India. One characteristic of Hindu society is that in 365 days, we celebrate more than 500 festivals. Because on the single day, often multiple parts of India celebrate very different festivals. Take for example Navratri. The way it is celebrated in the east and the west are very different. So the same 9 days are celebrated very differently in east and west. So there are the same festival, the same day is celebrated very differently across different parts of India. The rituals are different, the god that they pray to are different, the objectives at times are different, what food is to be eaten is different, what activities are to be performed are different. So in 365 days, we are looking at more than 500 festivals because on the same day we have multiple festivals at different places and different communities. Similarly, we have multiple spiritual calendars for the same 365 days, each calendar starting at a different date, ending at a different date, having a different flow. The central point is this: those interested in spirituality want to use time around the year for spiritual practice, and they want to do it systematically. And they want the spiritual calendar to be as in tune as possible with the weather calendar, with the health calendar according to Ayurveda, and with in tune with the astral calendar of the planets and the stars. And therefore, the spiritual calendars are created by different spiritual schools in India, and there are multiple spiritual schools, therefore multiple spiritual calendars. Now coming to mythology. These spiritual calendars, they proceed in certain ways. For example, one spiritual calendar would proceed where you start working on the physical body, then astral body, emotional body, mental body, karmic body. That's the way it would go. Another spiritual school would have a spiritual calendar which starts working according to chakras. So it would be, first month would be Muladhara, for 2 months maybe Muladhara, 2 months maybe Swadhisthana, and so on. The third school may look at working in broad categories of action, emotion, and intellect. They would not follow the chakra system, or they would not follow the multiple body system. They would follow the system which says you work first on the body, then on the emotions, and then on the knowledge or thoughts. So different schools have different ways of approaching the spiritual process, and based upon whatever process they are following, they create a year-round systematic calendar so that everything is systematized and activities are synergistic. One activity builds upon the gains of the previous activity. So we have 1 plus 1 equal to 11 kind of stuff. The synergy kicks in because of the way the processes are chronologically ordered one after the other. Now, when you have multiple spiritual calendars of this type, mythology is inextricably linked with this spiritual calendar, because the Hindu society essentially is a spiritual society. It is also a society that loves festivals and loves mythology. So for every festival, we create a myth. So if we look at even ordinary festivals, which are based upon weather or agriculture, over a period of time, some mythological story gets linked to that festival. And similarly, when we look at the spiritual calendar, and we look at a spiritual calendar where festivals are celebrated in order to advance a spiritual process, then each of those festivals is associated with a myth. It is associated with a particular form of God. It is associated with a particular ritual. It's associated with a particular food habit. It's associated with a particular mystical practice. It's associated with a particular kind of meditative practice or idol therapy or idol worship. All those things are inextricably put together, blended in the form of a package. And you see, the entire spiritual calendar, whatever calendar one is following, has events which are festivals. So you have events which are festivals and your events which are non-festivals. In either of the cases, there is a myth usually associated with a normal event or with a festival. And that is how the spiritual calendar and the mythology that goes together.
Sir, what exactly would you mean by spiritual calendar and how is it related to myths?
Let us say you are following the spiritual calendar from uh, um, Ganesh Chaturthi to Ganesh Chaturthi. Let's say you are following that, roughly speaking, August, September to August, September. So you would put your annual spiritual plan, the annual spiritual calendar starting from August going up to next August. So what we would do is you would start the calendar with the first festival of Ganesh Chaturthi, the advent of Lord Ganesha, because that would symbolize in the inner world, starting with the root chakra. whose deity is Lord Ganesha. So you are actually doing the tantric practice of starting from the bottom chakra and moving upwards. Some people do the other way. They start from the top chakra and move down. Some people start with the heart chakra and move down. Some people start with the heart chakra, move up and then move down. But suppose you are starting with a classical tantra practice of starting with the root chakra and moving up, then in Ganesh Chaturthi, the first festival will be Ganesh Chaturthi, and you would do Ganesh Puja and start off with Muladhara. And in Muladhara, you would work on solidity, the earth element according to Ayurveda, the solidity which is signified by Lord Ganesha. Lord Ganesha is the deity of that Muladhara, which is dealing with the will to survive, the paranoia related to survival, the aggression, and the fear. So it's a survival related mechanism dealing with survival, fear, paranoia, and the will to immortality or the aspiration to immortality. It also deals with good bodily health or sickness. So that is the first chakra you are working on. So the first thing you address is the physical fitness and the primary paranoia related to survival. And that you address the primary anxiety and fear related to survival and the primary aggression related to survival, you address first before you go to love, power, belongingness, creativity, and so on. So you start with the root chakra and you start with the Ganesh Puja and you try to establish solidity, harmony, and balance in the root chakra. And then you move to Navratri. The next festival would be Navratri. So there you are essentially trying to heal the relationship with the mother. And the good mother helps you to destroy the bad object. It is Ambe Mata destroying Mahishasura. So the good mother helps you to destroy the bad object and you neutralize the bad object with the strength of the good mother and you internalize and identify with the good mother, and that internalization of good, reliable, stable object inside the good mother then becomes the basis for good mental health, and then you proceed to the next chakra, which is sexuality. So then there would be a separate spiritual festival which goes into romance and sexuality and creativity and envy. It may be some Punam, it may be some Amavas, it may be something. And slowly it will start going upwards. So one by one, you will be looking at all the chakras and there would be festivals. And for each festival, there would be a deity, an idol that is to be worshipped. And related to that idol would be myths. So related to the good mother, there is the myth of Mahishasura. Related to Ganeshji, there are so many different myths. And these myths have been created in a way that they address the challenge of psychopathology and self-development. So myths there are catalysts. They are not just stories. They are catalytic elements in the process of self-healing and self-development. So along with the calendar of spiritual, along with the spiritual calendar would consist of a calendar of festivals and the calendar of non-festival events. And with each of these would be associated a myth, a ritual, a meditative practice, a food practice, a occult practice, and something to be done in the external world.
So, sir, how does the myth play a part in psychological healing or sadhana, or the spiritual process that we
Yeah,
say?
this is where the very deep utility of myth comes in. That myth is not just a story. Myth
Yes.
is not a work of literature. We
Hmm.
must separate the myth. We should not belittle the myth by calling it a fiction of imagination or fantasy or literature.
Right.
It is far more than that. It is at one level, it is like a dream which has been set free in the conscious state of the mind. Because it has been worked on so much, the disguise is so high that there is no fear to the repression barrier that will get decoded. The dream work is too much, and therefore the ego is confident that this dream work cannot be undone by interpretation. So it's a dream which is set free in the conscious state of the mind. Now, this is a very good entry into what the unconscious material is like. And this has elements of both the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. And therefore, for psychopathology, for self-healing, myths are very, very important. They are not just facts of, they are not just stories. They are valuable like dreams. One. Two, they are not only messengers which tell us what is there in the unconscious. They also, some of the myths are messengers, but some of the myths actually are healing entities. They are healing agents. That when you hear that story, certain things which you wanted are absorbed by you, certain things happen in you, certain psychological processes of identification of deficit, making up the deficits inside of you, certain half-processed entities, certain processes which require catharsis, all of that happens while you hear and you understand and you engage with the myth. So when you hear the myth, you understand the myth, you really genuinely feel the myth. Certain processes happen, the process of catharsis, the process of completion of some incomplete processing, the process of unfulfilled desires getting fulfilled, the process of finding a good, reliable, stable object, the process of finding security, the process of finding something immortal, higher than temporality of man, the process of finding meaning and immortality into the very fabric of existence and in the fabric of our life at the deepest level. All of these things happen when you hear a good myth. And that is how a good myth is a healing agent. It is not just a story. So for psychopathological exploration, for knowing something in the unconscious as well as for healing, the myths are very important, and particularly those myths which are chosen as a part of the spiritual calendar. Because when the guru or the expert draws up the spiritual calendar, it is not that he just draws randomly on any myth. So there is a large inventory of myths, and from that huge inventory of myths, you pick and choose certain myths, and if necessary, you create new myths in order to accomplish a healing psychopathological process or a self-advancement spiritual process or some process to get occult powers. So based upon the objective of healing or occult powers or spiritual development, myths are chosen and engaged with in a particular way. Some myths are just heard over and over again. Some myths actually are acted out, where somebody takes up a part and the myth is actually enacted as a psychodrama. And certain myths are meditated upon for very, very long periods of time, along with the idol in the front, in order to internalize the idol, the personality, and all the qualities associated with it. So the myth is very important for self-knowing, for self-healing, for occult processes, and for spiritual advancement. And just as there is a survival of fittest in the world of myths, there is also survival of fittest in the world of festivals. All festivals celebrated by one generation are not passed on to the next. Some don't pass the test of survival.
And even if they pass on, there are many changes,
Yes,
alterations
yes.
happening to it. Yeah.
So that is how the mythology gets enmeshed in the Hindu context, at least in the Eastern context largely, with the spiritual calendar and the spiritual process. There is no way we can separate mythology from the spiritual process or the spiritual process from the spiritual calendar in the Eastern context. Uh, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, yeah. Can we take up 2 minutes to discuss the subject a little deeper?
Yeah.
One of my choice and one of yours, maybe.
Okay. Okay.
So mine is Ganesha. You can go with your choice.
Okay. Okay. We can take up two myths which are used in the spiritual process. Let us say the myth of Ganesha and the myth of Parshuram. Okay. Uh, the myth of Ganesha, there are many myths of Ganesha, and the myth is used based upon what is the objective of using that myth. Say, for example, somebody is facing issues of narcissistic features, and humility is called for. The myth of Ganesha becoming an apprentice of Ved Vyasa. That myth is taken up. That Ganesha, although he is so knowledgeable, he accepts to become an apprentice to Ved Vyasa to note down all that Ved Vyasa says for the good of everyone. And this is a myth which is used repeatedly and elaborated in discussions with a person if you want to communicate the necessity of humility even in an otherwise accomplished person. Take the second myth of Ganesha and Kartikeya engaging in a duel, and Kartikeya goes around the universe and Ganesha goes around the parents. This is like hard work versus smart work, reality acceptance. You accept reality that you cannot be faster than the other person. You can find a clever way out, but you cannot defeat the other person as it is. So when you have to get into reality acceptance and creatively dealing with reality, this myth becomes useful. So for a person who literally takes everything, is not creative in life and finds difficulty in reality acceptance, this is a good myth to meditate upon. And of course, this myth is uh, discussed in details with the person. It's not just a two-liner that you give to somebody. There's a detailed discussion, deliberation, right? Pros and cons are debated, and through that, wisdom is passed on. And this wisdom is something where, because you have participated, it's a discovery process and you really believe in it. It's not something that somebody gives it to you. So through the discussion of the myth, you develop participative wisdom. Sorry, wisdom through participation, and that it's easy to own up because you have found it yourself. And there is a second aspect of the myth where you see the picture again and again, you hear the story again and again, and the unconscious psychological processes happen of deficit complementing, of complementing the deficit, of identification, of giving up envy and internalizing the good object, of getting a role model. Those unconscious processes also are happening. Take the second myth of Parshuram. This myth of Ganesha is used along with some festival. So if you have a spiritual calendar where there is a festival where you are going to worship knowledge, then the myth of Ganesha doing the apprenticeship of Ved Vyasa can be taken up. If you are going to start some form of karma yoga, and before you start off, you have to communicate that act but act smart and act accepting reality as it is in the outer world because you are about to enter a social process. Then the myth of Ganesha going around the parents becomes more productive. So which myth is used is based upon what kind of spiritual process is about to start and how the myth will be useful in that process. And the myth is always used apart from personal engagement and intellectual development of the myth, what we would call active imagination. Apart from that, it is used in far more deeper way for identification, for living together as a form of psychodrama, as a ritual, and so on. Coming to the second myth of Parshuram, this would be a myth which would be used along with the Ganesha myth if you are looking at Ganesha myth for consolidation in the Muladhara, the root chakra. So if you are starting the Tantric way from the Muladhara and you start with the Ganesha myth, first you have consolidation. Then the aggression and the paranoid schizoid split of the Muladhara, for that the Parshuram myth is very useful. Because Parshuram myth talks about the paranoid schizoid split. It talks about that anger, that thirst for blood, the thirst which will not quench. So the myth is that he killed all warrior class people of the entire planet 21 times. Obviously, nobody can go 21 times around the earth to kill everyone. So it's happening in his own mind that people to whom he had aggression towards, right? He had so much of aggression that 21 times it was like killing everyone of that type in this on this planet. So it is a paranoid schizoid open split which needs to be bridged, but which is not getting bridged. So it tells you about the need to get into depressive position and to practice forgiveness. Because that alone will bring peace and allow you to proceed to the next chakra. Till you are not done with the Parshuram problem in the Muladhara, you can't go about. So the Parshuram problem in the Muladhara has to be fixed first through mourning and forgiveness and depressive position attainment. And after that, once the Muladhara is in place, settled according to the spiritual point of view, that the consolidation is there, the stability is there, the good mother has been internalized according to Navratra myth, the paranoid schizoid split has been resolved according to the Parshuram myth, and the Muladhara is by and large taken care of, then you put in some god, some myth which talks about immortality. And that is internalized, even though as fantasy, it still has its power after internalization. It's the power of belief, even if it's not true. And once that positivity has been put into the Muladhara, then you go to the next chakra. So this is the way we can use each of the myths. And of course, when you use the myth, it is not a simple affair. Often along with the myth, an idol is given and you live with the idol and you keep reciting the myth, or you keep hearing the myth, or you keep contemplating on the myth, and over a period of time in your mental universe, that idol, that character of the idol or that god takes a form, and you start engaging with that person or that deity in your mental universe. And that is where relationships form, deficits are overcome, difficult things are catharted out, protection is gained, a good object is instituted inside, and many other things happen. So this is the way mythology plays a very key role in the spiritual process and the spiritual calendar.
Right. A classic way of doing it is doing the kathas. You know, you fast for so many Thursdays or Mondays, and you read the stories out to
Yes,
yourself. The way Karwa Chauths are being performed
yes,
and all.
yes.
Yeah. Sir, is there a way to add psychoanalysis and holistic healing in the spiritual calendar today? Then.
Very much so. In fact, holistic healing
Mhm.
already is there. It is just not used enough. So if we look at the spiritual calendar and we look at the myths associated with the spiritual calendar, the processes which are associated with all the events, uh, the spiritual calendars of many spiritual schools are very much in sync with the Ayurvedic calendar. So they will say if rainy season starts, then the first Monday of rainy season is for Lord Ganesha, and Lord Ganesha likes milk and the fluff, poha, what they call. Right? And that is in order to quench the acidity which naturally rises up in that particular time of the year. So the myth is used to propagate to the masses a medical concept that at this point in time, you should consume XYZ food because at this time, acidity is going to go up naturally. So the mythology is used there in order to be a carrier for a medical concept. Similarly, when we look at the spiritual calendar, many of the spiritual calendars are in sync with Ayurvedic calendars. Many of the spiritual calendars have regular pranic healing or Reiki healing events. They have trying to overcome psychological difficulties with the use of herbs or psychedelic substances. They have use of, I would say, a kind of a proto-homeopathy, where in very minute forms, certain metals which are treated in a particular way called bhasma, they are taken. So the holistic healing or the holistic healing way of using sort of proto-homeopathy, sort of yoga, pranayam, pranic healing, reiki, acupressure, acupuncture, herbs, psychedelic substances, crystals, all those things are mixed in the spiritual calendar. And there are regular ways where on particular full moon days or particular new moon days, certain holistic healing techniques have to be followed. And on an everyday basis, certain yogic or pranic healing techniques have to be followed. Certain visualization practices have to be done. Certain mantra practices have to be done. So the holistic healing is already there. It is just that it is not used enough and it's forgotten. So the spiritual calendar has mythology, has holistic healing, it has occult sciences, it has Ayurveda built into it, into the calendar. Coming to psychoanalysis, I think this is something that needs to be added, because in a very primitive proto way, the concepts of psychoanalysis were appreciated, but not in the way the subject has come up now. It's a very unfortunate situation that despite having such a rich subject, we are not using it for spirituality. Rather, spiritual people are busy fighting psychoanalysis, and the other way also is true. So instead of mutual enrichment, there is a mutual conflict for no reason. And my feeling is it is time that we use psychoanalysis to understand the spiritual processes at more elemental levels. Like, how do we psychoanalytically explain the process of idol worship? How do we understand psychoanalytically the engagement with the myth and the healing that is happening through the myth? How do we psychoanalytically understand what is happening in a yagna practice? What is happening in a worship practice? So when we combine psychoanalysis, we combine holistic healing into the spiritual calendar, then the spiritual calendar really becomes an integral, holistic, and a very powerful scientific and systematic spiritual calendar, which addresses both psychopathology and spiritual self-advancement.
True. So, sir, how do you see the idea of spiritual calendar and myths evolving in the future? And where exactly are we when you say, I mean, how long it is for us to go, to reach that level when you say we have to do something
I
about
think
it?
we would be looking at 15 to 20 years of period before a real integration can actually happen. Difficulty is today most people dismiss myths as fantasies, and they dismiss fantasies as just uh, a kind of a imagination gone vagabond. They don't see fantasies with the respect with which a psychoanalytic person would see fantasies. So psychoanalysis looks at dreams and fantasies in a very respectful way, because for us, these are very, very meaningful entities. Unfortunately, the bulk of society does not see that way. Society largely sees it as sort of dispensable, meaningless fantasies. So first is, we as a society have to appreciate the value of myth, both as communicator of the unconscious and healing agent for the unconscious and a spiritual development agent for the self. Second is we have to go into not only understanding the myth, but generating new myths. It is not that myths have to come to us only from the past and we cannot generate new myths. So we also have to generate new myths based upon the objectives we have for using those myths. And I believe once we understand how each myth helps us to heal ourselves or helps us for self-advancement and in what way we should be using myths in association with idol therapy, all alone, during a particular point, should we use 2-3 different myths together in a series, in parallel? Once we have those kind of inquiries into how to use the myth, how to develop a myth, how to put together number of myths for a psychopathological process, healing process, or for a spiritual process, then we will be able to scientifically go ahead by to integrate the myths into the psychoanalytic process and in the spiritual process. Today, in psychoanalysis, the Jungians use myth quite well. And in the spiritual process, some schools in the East, they use the myths very well. In fact, most schools in the Hindu spiritual area do use the myths very well. But largely apart from this, we need to integrate, first understand, and then integrate scientifically myths into the healing process and into the spiritual process.
And so, what should be our role as you're talking? What should be that first step for us to take? Eh,
I
Can
think
you?
the first step is to preserve the myths
Okay.
so that myths are not lost. And the second step is to study mythology slightly more and use myths more for entertainment, for self-knowing, and for self-development. And once
Right.
these two basic things are in place, then we can go into
Hmm.
a more scientific study of myths and then developing new myths and then
Right.
integrating them into our processes, which may be self-exploratory processes, uh,
Hmm.
processes of social advancement, or processes of spiritual development.
Okay. And there is very little work done on all this, must admit.
Yeah, because the study of mythology, like the study of anthropology, is generally kept reserved within the same department. The spillover has
Right.
not been as much as it should have been.
Okay.
So it is like uh, those who study mythology generally keep to themselves. Anthropology, they try their best to offer it their concepts to others, but others are not as willing to put
To
themselves in their
explain.
shoes, understand them genuinely, and incorporate those concepts. So
Right.
there is a treasure yet to be unveiled and used in both uh, mythology, anthropology, and I would also say epistemology, which has to be brought in to psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and spirituality.
Well, let's plan something for the new year to come then.
Sure enough, sure.
So, with this, we end our talk series on mythology and psychoanalysis. And we could not have been better timed, right, sir? We are at the fag end of the year, seemingly a very difficult year in that sense.
Yes, yes.
But as we get into the new year with renewed vigor and lots of positivity, from all of us, we wish you a very happy new year. And we'll, of course, continue with our series talk. And we look forward to more of your comments, suggestions, your inputs. And you know where you have to write. You can mail us at hvindia@gmail.com. And happy new year. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Happy New Year to you and to all our viewers. Happy New Year
Thank you.
and namaste.
Namaste. Namaste, sir.